This is the most absurd way of repaying a debt I've ever seen. Saved by a sea woman, he immediately wants to take her as a concubine, with the reason being, I can't let down this life-saving grace. When my husband was rescued and brought back, there was a timid sea woman by his side. He casually gave orders with a cold expression. She merely saved my life. You just arranged something for her. So I found a son of an imperial merchant to betroth to the sea woman. But he lost his temper at me for the first time. Scholars, farmers, artisans, merchants, you are having my life. Saving benefactor marry into the lowest merchant class. Who exactly are you humiliating with this move? When she saved me, there was already physical contact between us. Why not take her into the household? That would properly fulfill this debt of gratitude. I agreed to it. Just like when he sought to marry me back then, he wanted to repay the debt with his body again, truly thinking himself so precious. She saved your life. You go ahead and repay your debt. What does it have to do with me? I threw down the divorce papers and left alone for the frontier. But Lord Pei, who had just brought his delicate concubine into the household, went mad, willing to anger the emperor himself just to chase his wife back. The moment Peiji entered the room, he held me tightly in his embrace. My lady, do you know how much I've missed you? Breathing in the long mist scent of pine. My tears also fell streaming down. Since he went to inspect the salt fields along the coast and was ambushed by local forces, he had been missing for nearly a year. Now he had finally truly returned to my side. Peiji raised his head and gently wiped away my tears. To see you again, I fought my way back from death's door. Hearing this, my tears flowed even more fiercely, and I sobbed uncontrollably. No, it is because you were fortunate enough to be saved by a benefactor, otherwise we would never have reunited in this life. When I mentioned the benefactor, Peiji's eyes flickered slightly, as if recalling something, then he casually instructed. Oh right, that sea girl has no father or mother, so I brought her back. You handle her arrangements. I remembered that at the mansion gate, following my husband off the carriage, was also that Miss Hiei Shuang, hiding behind Peiji Hai, her eyes remained downcast the whole time. After performing an awkward bow, while others paid no mind, she herself was startled into a panic. At first, I didn't understand why my husband didn't just give her some gold and silver, but instead brought her to the capital where the climate and customs are all different. Now that Peiji explained it this way, I understood. Hiei Shuang was all alone and destitute by the sea, so it would be better to rely on this favor to find a good marriage in the capital as security for the rest of her life. I nodded repeatedly. She has shown us great kindness, we must repay her well. His expression remained cool and indifferent, unconcerned. She merely saved my life. That is all. The next day, after Peiji left to handle government affairs, while I had people search for a roster of eligible talented men of marriageable age in the capital, I also prepared generous gifts, planning to personally thank my benefactor and conveniently inquire about her expectations for a husband. But just as I arrived in the courtyard, a figure lunged out. Xiaobai, you've finally come. I was so scared. But seeing it was me, Hiei Shuang abruptly stopped herself and lowered her head to perform a perfunctory curtsy. When she raised her head again, her eyes seemed veiled with a layer of mist, evasive and flickering, not daring to look directly at me. I felt puzzled. Ever since I stopped wielding weapons and devoted myself to being an inner household wife, what I was most often praised for was being magnanimous and kind. How was it that now I had instead frightened the woman before me? Tingyu helped her inside, and I surveyed the room's furnishings. Seeing that all the furniture and daily necessities were of superior quality, I felt relieved. The steward at least knew what mattered and had not been negligent. Except, my gaze lingered for a moment on that vermilion lacquered wedding bed decorated with 100 children motif. Hiei Shuang shrank to the side, and I softened my expression to gently comfort her. Benefactor need not be constrained. Please treat this place as your own home. At these words, she forced a smile, but the corners of her eyes reddened slightly. It is not Shuang's fault. Xiaobai said he'd stay with me after returning, but since I entered the residence, I haven't seen him at all. Xiaobai. A trace of dejection flashed through Hiei Shuang's eyes, and her smile became even more strained. That would be Lord Pei. At that time, he had lost his memory and didn't remember his own name. Seeing his fair skin, I gave him this name. My heart jolted. Amnesia, why had Peiji never mentioned this to me? A Shuang had a timid nature. Even when chatting, she couldn't keep it up for more than a few sentences. I could only cut straight to the point. Miss, he is also of marriageable age now. May I ask what kind of man she fancies? She lowered her eyelids, making it impossible to discern her expression. I'll leave it entirely to Lord Pei's discretion. I could only rub my temples and return to my own courtyard. The steward had been waiting for quite some time, holding the gift list for me to review before storing. After Peiji's recent incident, the Emperor bestowed generous rewards as compensation. As I skimmed through the list, I suddenly remembered that Vermilion Lacquer 100 Sons wedding bed. I looked up at the steward. At our wedding, the Emperor bestowed a Vermilion Lacquer 100 Sons wedding bed to celebrate my husband and I being united in marriage, with blessings for many children. Latter, my husband, fearing it would stir sad feelings in me, had it moved to the storage. You are really not being thorough in your work. How could you now place it in an unmarried female guest's room? A trace of bewilderment flashed in the steward's eyes. The furnishings in Miss He's room were all personally selected by the master from the storage. As for that bed, the master even said Miss He was accustomed to having her way, and fearing a small bed would be uncomfortable, specially chose it. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. Peiji sent someone to relay a message, said he just got back and had lots of official business, so he wouldn't be having dinner with me. I was worried about his memory loss and wanted to ask him about it in detail, but I was afraid he'd be so busy he'd miss mealtime and hurt his stomach. So I brought a food box and rushed to the study. From 2 zhang away, I could already hear a woman's loud shouting. Her voice was exactly the same as during the day, but her tone was completely different. Xiao Bai, didn't you say you'd keep me company when you got back? How come I haven't seen you all day? And that wife of yours came looking for me, with a whole bunch of people behind her. So scary. Peiji hated having others in his study the most. Even when I was there, I had to stay completely silent. I thought he'd get angry, and my heart tightened. But the man's voice that came out not only wasn't angry, it even carried a hint of undisguised affection. She is my wife, so of course she has to thank you properly. Besides, I just got home and have a lot on my hands. How can I be with you every single moment? The woman let out a light snort. Coming back with you is no fun at all. It is nothing like when we were by the sea, spending every day together, stepping on sand and catching fish, watching impression, sunrise and sunset, doing whatever we wanted. And it was just the two of us, only the two of us. Ever since we came to the capital, it feels like you've become a different person. You are not my Xiao Bai anymore. Her tone carried an indescribable loneliness. Accompanied by the sound of fabric rubbing, the man let out a sigh. Now that I've recovered my memory, I naturally have to shoulder my responsibilities and can no longer be as carefree as I was by the sea. Here Shuang also echoed with melancholy. Yes, 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 my Lord Xiao Bai. Lord Xiao Bai, who cares about family and country. Then the two of them laughed through their tears together, after Peiji finished laughing. His tone was gentle. Come, I'll teach you to write your name. Greet. This is a Shuang. Shuang. What does this Shuang mean? It is the Shuang from one life, one world, one pair of people. I hastily turned and left, unable to bear listening any longer, that very night. I drafted a list of marriage candidates suitable for he, a Shuang. Early the next morning, I sent people to make detailed inquiries. After Peiji left court and finished his midday meal, I placed this person's complete dossier before him. Husband Miss A, Shuang is your benefactor, and mine as well. This young Master Chen is someone I specially selected, of good character, well off, no concubines in his household, and similar in age to Miss A, Shuang. Please take a look, and if it is suitable, I'll have someone start making arrangements right away. Peiji's hand paused as he picked up his teacup, his brow furrowing slightly before returning to normal. Marriage so soon. Miss Shuang is unmarried and staying in the residence for long might invite gossip. This person is one I carefully selected from all eligible men in the entire capital. If you are worried she might be mistreated, why not take her as a sworn sister? I smiled faintly. Does husband find anything improper? Peiji set down his teacup, eyelids lowered, barely suppressing the impatience between his brows. Madam has always handled matters appropriately. I pushed the ledger further in his direction. If that is so, then please, husband, take a look. Scholar, farmer, craftsman, merchant. Merchants are the most lowly. She is my lifesaver. Who exactly are you humiliating with this move? Each word struck down, a loss of composure I'd never seen from him before. I was so shocked I hadn't yet had time to explain. Outside the door, however, a servant came to summon Pei. Miss Ashwang has been vomiting on and off since last night, hasn't eaten or drunk anything till this noon, and is now crying, saying she can't adapt to the climate, begging master to let her go back. Pei strode away without looking back. I stood up, watching his increasingly distant, flustered figure, leaning against the doorframe for a long while. When the dampness at the corners of my eyes was dried by the cold wind, I called out loudly, "Simone, go fetch the imperial physician. We absolutely cannot let Miss Ashwang come to any harm." The maid Tinyu felt indignant on my behalf. Since returning, the young master seems like a different person. He has never spoken to you this way before. Moreover, the young master Chen you selected is the youngest son of an imperial merchant. Merchants have always divided their estates equally among their sons, so even the youngest son can receive a considerable fortune. Miss Ashwang is just an orphaned girl from the seaside. To gain such a marriage match is already a blessing. What exactly is the young master angry about? I turned around and looked at the overturned teacup that had soaked and smudged the writing on the records. As if answering Tinju, yet also as if informing myself. What is he angry about? Probably angry about being unable to control his own fate. Pagey and I learned the imperial physician's diagnosis results at the same time. But he didn't come to my room until late at night. Seeing the candle still lit by my bedside, he seemed somewhat surprised. "Madam isn't asleep yet." I handed him the records I had copied over again, with a half smile. "I am reflecting on which aspect of this candidate doesn't suit your preferences." Pagey didn't take them, but knelt by my bed, slowly pulling down my hand that was holding up the records. He Ashwang cannot marry him. His palm was ice cold, the chill transmitting to my body, stirring waves of trembling. I lowered my eyes to look at him, my expression impassive. Why, the day she saved me, there was inevitably some physical contact. If she were to marry another, I interrupted him. The current female emperor governs, customs are open, women can even remarry. As I spoke, I looked straight into his eyes. What, are you different? Just because someone touched you, they must remain a widow for you for life. Pagey's lips pulled into a stiff arc. That is not what I meant. If that is the case, then we'll exchange the betrothal agreement tomorrow. Seeing me turn over to sleep, he anxiously grabbed hold of me. Ashwang is already my woman. I kept silent with my back to him, and this silence seemed to give him the courage to confess. Back then, I hit my head on a reef, and after being rescued and waking up, I forgot everything. Ashwang and I, a man and woman alone together, day after day. Over time, we got married and started living together. My nails dug deep into my palms as I kept my eyes tightly shut, not letting my tears fall. It really was as I had thought during those days when I rushed day and night searching everywhere for him. During those days when I was sick with worry, unable to eat or drink. He was being lovey-dovey with another woman, having bowed to heaven and earth. After a long while, I suppressed the trembling in my voice. "So, the child in her belly, it is yours, isn't it?" "You already knew." Pagey's face couldn't hide his panic, his Adam's apple bobbing for a long time before he pressed my palm against the side of his face, with tears welling in his eyes, trembling lips pleading in a low voice. "Ashwang, yes. My name is also Ashwang. It is just that this homophonous name changed owners after he returned. And now, because of that woman, it is fallen back upon my ears again. Ashwang, things have come to this point. I can't betray her." His head rested fragility against my palm, his eyes churning with pain that was hard to suppress. He had said these same words to me like this 10 years ago too. Back then, during the Great War with Shuo Kingdom, Pei Ji, who served as military strategist, was captured by enemy forces. To save him, I infiltrated the enemy camp alone in the dead of night, but I was discovered while escaping, and both my right arm and lower abdomen were severely injured. When I woke up, he had his face buried in my palm just like this, tears in his eyes. Ashwang, for all eternity, I will never betray you. Tears finally fell in large drops, staining the mandarin duck-embroidered brocade quilt with dark circles. Seeing me in this state, Peiji tried to hold me tightly. You have to understand me. I had amnesia back then and didn't remember anything. By the time I remembered everything, it was already done. I have to take responsibility for he Ashwang. I closed my eyes in pain. It was true, he had to take responsibility for what he did while he had amnesia, but the affection he showed her during that time was also genuine. After a long while, I asked in a hoarse voice, "How do you want to take responsibility for her?" "Just need to give her a title, that is all." The next morning, I handed young Master Chen's file to Ting Yu. "Keep it safe and look at it when you have time. It'll be useful later." Ting Yu accepted it in confusion. Then she helped me dress in my hairpins and ceremonial robes, and I boarded the carriage to enter the palace and have an audience with the Empress. Back when I rescued Peiji, the two of us became a celebrated tale in the military. When he returned to the capital in triumph, Peiji asked the Emperor to grant the marriage. After the marriage, I didn't get pregnant for a long time. After being examined by several imperial physicians, it was determined that my lower abdomen was injured when I saved him, making it difficult to conceive. Plus, my right arm was also crippled from saving him, and I could no longer wield swords or spears. Both the power granted by birth and the skills honed through training were lost. After Peiji comforted me, he entered the palace overnight to see the Emperor again. He came back with an imperial edict for one lifetime, one generation, one pair. This was also the second thing Peiji begged me for last night. He wanted to give he Shuang a proper status, but now he couldn't make that decision. The Empress listened to understand the intent, slightly raised her eyes, her authority bearing down. Changing orders day and night. "Minister Feng, do you want to make me lose credibility before the realm?" I pressed my lips tight, my gaze frank and open. He Shuang saved Peiji's life. Let Peiji repay his debt with his own body. What does it have to do with me? Hearing this, the Empress suddenly laughed loudly. "I understand now. But what will you offer in exchange for this divorce document?" I knelt down and reported solemnly. "I heard the Shu kingdom at the border is invading. I request to lead the troops into battle and am willing to share your Majesty's burdens again." The Empress withdrew her expression solemn, granted. When I returned to the residence, Peiji rushed over quickly, barely suppressing some anxiety between his brows. Did the Emperor approve? I shifted my body to avoid his touch, lowered my eyes and nodded slightly. "Just focus on arranging your wedding with he Ashwang." A flash of pain crossed his eyes. "Ashwang, don't be like this. I don't want it to be this way either. I promise you, after she enters the household, it absolutely won't affect our relationship. I am just giving her a place to settle down, taking good care of her to repay the debt of saving my life. After she gives birth to the child, we'll bring it to you, which works out perfectly since you can't have children." My heart ached, and I interrupted him with a question. "What if I am also pregnant?" His gaze swept across my flat belly, his pupils suddenly contracting. "I've been missing for over half a year and just returned home. Whose child would yours be? Look at that." When he brought a strange woman home, I never had a shred of doubt. Yet with just one simple sentence from me, he turned around and pinned the crime of infidelity on me, the corner of my mouth curved into a mocking arc. Just kidding. His brows and eyes relaxed, but behind us came a timid female voice. "Elder sister." My gaze fell upon Hiashuang. Only a day had passed, but just because I'd relented last night, her clothing and adornments had already become much more luxurious. Perhaps because of all the jewels and hairpins, when she curtsied, she carelessly lost her balance and fell to one side. Peiji quickly stepped forward to support her. Seeing this, he looked up, his brows slightly furrowed. "Ashwang is with child. Everything must be handled carefully. From now on, she won't need to curtsy when she sees you." But before I could speak, Ashwang rushed to say, "Ashwang has just entered the household and should naturally observe proper conduct. Having met elder sister, how could I not pay my respects? Xiao Bai, oh no, husband, you are setting me up for trouble." Peiji's brows furrowed even tighter. "If that is the case, then you two should meet less often." As he spoke, he raised his head. "Madam, You need not trouble yourself over a shuang. These past 6 months you've toiled and suffered searching for me. You should rest well." I met the provocative gaze of the woman in his arms with amusement and smiled. "Fine, meet less often. I am afraid there won't be many more chances to meet anyway. Thinking of my imminent departure from the capital and the many matters still to handle, I couldn't be bothered to deal with the two of them." I turned to leave, but He Shuang's voice pursued me from behind. "I see elder sister looks haggard. Why not call for an imperial physician to take a look?" Peiji fell silent for a moment. Then he said in a low voice, "Very well." My heart, already frozen through, suddenly gave birth to several measures of hatred. After nightfall, Peiji came silently to my room. Seeing me polishing my blade and sword, a trace of displeasure flashed in his eyes. "Since these are no longer useful, why waste effort on them? When you have nothing to do, you could embroider some children's clothes. When Janga is born, it would show the care of you as his legitimate mother." The weapon flashed with cold light, shooting straight onto Peiji's face. He must have forgotten this spear once saved him from beneath his horse. This blade once cut down arrows shot at him. But now there is no need for it, so it has become useless. I am the same. These hands that once fought for his life now have to sew clothes for his child with another woman, and the child I was destined to have has no chance of being born because of him. I stare at him, word by word. "On what grounds?" Peiji heaves a long sigh, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind, his hot breath hitting the back of my ear, making me nauseous. "I know you are angry about what I did today, but there were many servants present, and you spoke that way, so I had no choice but to summon the imperial physician to prove your innocence." Seeing me struggling forcefully to break free from his arms, Peiji's eyes suddenly turn cold. "Feng Shuang, you've had no father or mother since childhood, so naturally you don't understand the importance of blood relations. Now that He Shuang is carrying my child, I am not a cold-hearted and ungrateful man, so naturally I must treat her well." As he speaks, there is actually a threatening tone. "Lately I've been tied up with court affairs and have no time to attend to matters in the residence. But this is my first child, and I don't want you to let jealousy cloud your heart and cause trouble that shouldn't happen." So in his eyes, I too would become that kind of calculating woman of the inner chambers. Suddenly it feels laughable. Who would have thought that when your heart dies completely, even anger disappears entirely? However, I am worried he might hear some rumors. So many affairs to handle. Has there been trouble at the border again? Peiji laughs mockingly. "You just manage your inner chambers properly. What do court affairs have to do with you? Don't tell me you are planning to drag that crippled body of yours onto the battlefield with a sword, throwing your life away." Watching his retreating figure as he left with a flick of his sleeves, I slowly looked down at my left hand. He hadn't noticed. I'd already worn layer upon layer of calluses here. Ever since my right arm was crippled, I've never accepted my fate. At first, I was afraid Peiji would worry about my health, so I secretly practiced wielding a blade and sword with my left hand later, when he got busy with government affairs and frequently went out on inspection tours. I practiced my moves while he wasn't home. Finally, during those days when he went missing, the panic of losing him shrouded me every single moment. So in the gaps between traveling, I trained desperately, terrified that if danger struck, I wouldn't be able to save him from peril again. Now, my left hand is just as skilled as my right hand used to be. But Peiji no longer needs me to save him, however. The people of Great Sheng still need me to save them. Peiji was right. I've been without father or mother since childhood. It was Great Sheng's foundling home that raised me, and it was the Empress's spring sprout system that gave me the chance to learn martial arts and join the military. I originally had nothing. It was Great Sheng that gave me the foundation to establish myself. So for giving me new life, I must pledge my loyalty unto death. In the days that followed, Peiji never set foot in my room again. The poorly managed servants also read the wind, scrambling over each other to fawn over and flatter He Shuang. But toward me they were perfunctory at best. Taking this opportunity, I sold off all the properties I had accumulated in the capital over the years. Tinju watched me pack my luggage, her voice thick with emotion. "Miss, are you really going to the battlefield again?" I handed her the remaining land deeds for a few shops, along with my jewelry box and banknotes, and asked, "Do you still have the file on that merchant's son?" Tingyu didn't understand my meaning. "I've kept it safe. Are you satisfied with that man?" A rosy blush spread across her cheeks. "That man is quite good. Then would it be all right if I arranged your marriage to him?" Ever since I established my military achievements, Tingyu had been by my side. When I went to war, she kept watch over the residence alone. When I returned home victorious, she attended to me personally. In this world, she was the only one from whom I felt something resembling familial affection. This departure would be different from before. There was nothing left for me to yearn for in the capital. If I didn't die in this campaign, I might be stationed at the border for a long time. Tingyu was getting older, and I couldn't delay her prospects. As soon as she nodded, I immediately arranged the marriage contract with the Chen family. With her servitude status removed and recognized as my sworn sister, Tingyu became a respectable young lady from a good family. With my status as Feng Shuang backing her, the Chen family was more than pleased. So before leaving the capital, I personally handled this wedding. But only a few days after Tingyu's wedding, Paji heard about it. He stormed into the room wrapped in fury. "Feng Shuang, how have you become so inconsiderate? I know you resent me, but you shouldn't take your anger out on innocent people. You married off a mere servant girl into the family that was once chosen for a Shuang. Where does that leave a Shuang? Do you know that after a Shuang found out about this, she kept saying she wasn't worthy, cried in grievance the whole night, and it has even affected the baby." I met his eyes surging with anger, my gaze clear. "All citizens of the great Sheng kingdom are equal. Where does this talk of who is worthy and who is not come from?" Peiji was momentarily at a loss for words, his brows tightly knitted. "Feng Shuang, how did you become so sharp-tongued?" I understood where the disappointment in his words came from, thinking back to our time in the military camp. I had fighting skills but was clumsy with words. Whenever I was teased by others until my face turned red, it was always him who came to my rescue. The other soldiers would joke, "On the battlefield, General Feng is the beauty saving the hero. In camp, military advisor, PI is the hero saving the beauty. What a perfect match." I lowered my eyes and let out a scornful laugh. "Thanks to you." His expression grew even darker, but as if thinking of something, his tone softened again. "Shuang, I understand you are hurting inside. We were already separated for months, and when I returned there was the matter with congratulating Shuang. It is only natural for us as husband and wife to have some friction. I've been too busy to get away these days. After tomorrow is over, let's have a good talk." "All right." As he spoke, his tone became increasingly gentle and slow. "You know, the life and death bond between you and me is something others can never compare to." Peiji drew closer and closer to me. I hurriedly turned sideways to block the front of the bed and gave a vague response, seeing that I was no longer confronting him. The corners of his lips curved up slightly. "Tomorrow, you'll be there, right?" After saying this, he added hesitantly, "Although she is being taken as a concubine, a Shuang is still a girl from a respectable family. Everything that should be done must be done. To avoid gossip, I hope you can come." Mindful of what was behind me, I softly responded with a yes. Peiji left satisfied. I then lifted the bedding to reveal the bundle I had prepared underneath, and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it wasn't discovered. Because I had to bring the Empress's secret decree to the border, this trip couldn't be known by anyone. And tomorrow was the day the Empress wanted me to leave the capital. The Phoenix sedan entered through the gates. The concubine's name entered the registry, bowing at the wedding hall, binding hair as spouses, exchanging nuptial cups. All the proper formalities were there, and even some improper ones too. But the one ritual of serving tea to the principal wife was skipped over with the excuse of being with child and unsuitable for exertion. I didn't take it to heart. Dressed in ceremonial attire, wearing a radiant smile, I appeared before the hall full of guests, putting on one last act of deception. Seeing this, Peiji nodded at me with satisfaction. Originally scheduled to leave the capital at the hour of the goat, a message came from His Majesty's side. "Last night we captured a Shu country spy. This person holds a list of informants within our army. We need to interrogate him thoroughly to obtain a confession. Then I'll set out with the registry. I had no choice but to stay in a remote back courtyard, quietly waiting for the signal. Just in this gap, He Shuang appeared behind me. Sister, you made me search so hard for you, to think you are hiding here alone in tears. My heart tightened, and I turned to look. He Shuang had taken off her madder, coloured wedding dress and changed into a vermilion conjugal bliss skirt. This vivid colour, illuminated by the sunlight, looked no different from true red. Seeing my gaze fall on her, He Shuang smiled and spun in a circle. Sister, does this outfit look good on me? My husband specially sought out the fabric to make it for me. He told me that although there is a matter of who came first, I am equally his wife. I withdrew my gaze expressionlessly. What do you want with me? Her expression also turned cold, staring at me with sinister intensity. Feng Shuang, I know you are putting on a tough front, but who told you to block my path? You deserve this. Seeing me remain unmoved, she pressed closer step by step. You know what? I am not actually called Shuang. Oh, my original name was Eitzi in our local dialect. It means someone without parents. So when I, who had nothing, met Peiji, I understood. I had to seize hold of him. He has delicate skin and tender flesh. One look and you can tell he is from a wealthy family. As long as I grasp onto him, I grasp onto the second half of my life. As expected, according to my plan, he fell in love with me. We bowed in marriage and became husband and wife, and then he was found by his family. But I never expected that you would exist. Feng Shuang, you had every advantage from the start. You have everything, while what I want, I can only snatch bit by bit from your hands. Tell me, aren't you just hateful? Do I have everything? I don't agree. Since I was young, orphanages have already been widespread throughout the entire Great Sheng. All orphans are taken in, not only provided with food and clothing, but also educated according to their talents. There is a selection every year during that period. Good prospects are selected layer by layer. Some are chosen for academic schools, some for martial schools. Those who excel in neither literature nor martial arts go to master a craft, whether textile embroidery and medicine, or smelting, casting and carpentry, and so on. He Shuang and I started at the same point with equal opportunities. But she never seized any of them, and could only make a living fishing alone after leaving the orphanage as an adult. While I carved out a path for myself with my own flesh and blood, where is she pitiable, and where am I hateful? Seeing I was unmoved, He Shuang gently caressed her not yet swollen belly. You two are just so useless, letting me take everything away from you so easily. Don't blame me, blame only that you are too useless. I once wielded a long spear, penetrated deep into enemy ranks, and killed over 100 enemies. I've also feinted east and struck west, leading a small elite squad to completely ambush the enemy army. I have the means, I just don't need to use them within the inner residence, on women and children. I shook my head. I don't resent you. She was very dissatisfied with this answer, and suddenly leaned close to whisper. Then do you know why I call myself a Shuang? Because when Peiji was unconscious, he kept calling out a Shuang over and over, calling out for a lifetime with one person. So when he woke up, and I discovered he had forgotten everything, I said, my name is a Shuang. One sentence established a Shuang's selfishness and calculation. She not only wanted to steal Peiji as a person, but also steal the original wife's identity symbol. She changed Shuang, seemingly just switching a character, but in reality wanted to completely erase Feng Shuang's existence and mold herself into Peiji's destined, one-paired person. I stepped back 2 steps, keeping my distance from her. What does that have to do with me? Her expression grew increasingly manic. In this PI residence, I want there to be only one, a Shuang. He, a Shuang, didn't know that Feng Shuang also wasn't my real name. I relied on my military achievements to earn an honorific bestowed by the Empress. Feng Shuang, who would stop the snow and seal the frost for the great Sheng nation. Outside the courtyard wall came the call of a cuckoo bird. I knew it was time to depart. I smiled faintly at He Shuang. Fine, as you wish. With that, I leaped out of the residence. I jumped onto a swift horse already prepared and galloped away. But for some reason, a shrill scream came from within the residence, startling flocks of birds into flight. Thanks to Zhou's surprise attack at the start of the battle, the enemy's fine general was slain and their morale plummeted. Even though the Shui kingdom hastily sent a replacement general, they still couldn't withstand our side riding the momentum to attack cities and seize territory. In less than a year, the war ended. The Shu kingdom offered up 3 cities as a sign of surrender. When the Grand Army was returning in triumph, I didn't want to go back to the capital and wanted to continue guarding the frontier. But I received an imperial edict from the Empress, so I had no choice but to follow the army back. Along the way, Zhou, who had been promoted to vice-general, looked at the scenery along the route with eyes full of curiosity. My heart ached, thinking that he'd joined the military young and was only used to seeing the yellow sands beyond the frontier. When had he ever experienced the flourishing lights and misty spring scenery of Great Sheng? I was about to comfort him when he tugged his horse and clopped over to my side. General, I originally thought the moment of victory would be the most satisfying, but I never expected that seeing Great Sheng, which we protect, peaceful and its people prosperous. That is what is truly satisfying. The warm breeze brushed my face, and I couldn't help but appreciate him even more. This is the meaning of our existence. Since Great Sheng gave us this life, we ought to protect Great Sheng's people so they can live good lives. But Zhou shook his head. General, I am different from you. You are the one who gave me my life. The affection in his eyes was no longer concealed. I am originally from Xuancheng. Back then, when the Shui kingdom's forces reached the city, you led troops to hold back the enemy army and even chased them back. General, in my heart, you are not only the admired General Feng, but also the benefactor who saved my entire family's lives. I have worked hard to catch up to where your gaze can reach. I wonder if there might be a chance for me to... This was the first time Zhou spoke of his origins. I lightly tapped his helmet with my riding crop, interrupting the affection he was about to express. No one is an insurmountable mountain, and neither am I. You are still young. You'll eventually understand that I am merely ordinary. At the victory banquet, court officials were all present. Peiji was also in attendance. His once graceful and elegant figure now left only empty flowing robes. During the banquet, across the crowd of toasting people, his burning gaze followed me constantly like a shadow. Feeling utterly uncomfortable, I found an excuse of getting some air to sober up and left my seat. But just as I reached the imperial lake, Peiji followed closely behind. His voice trembled, and the corners of his eyes were red. Ah, Shuang, I think of you and miss you day and night. From the day I learnt you went to the border, I couldn't sleep at night, terrified you might come to any harm. I understand that it was he, as Shuang, who schemed to drive you away. I've already punished her severely, and now she wouldn't dare offend you in the slightest. Can you forgive me for my momentary foolishness? Hearing this, I only found it laughable. I raised my eyes and looked straight into his. She is your wife, you should treat her well. Peiji's eyes were red, rimmed, his Adam's apple bobbing. I have always had only one wife, and that is you. Not anymore. Perhaps it was when you lost your memory and bowed in marriage to her, or when you returned to the manor and only called her a Shuang, or when you wanted to repay her with your body. I was no longer your wife from any of those moments. His body, hollowed out by alcohol, swayed unsteadily. Just as he was about to step forward and grab me, he was blocked by a tall figure. Zhou Zed's voice boomed like a bell. General Feng, His Majesty summons you. Watching the retreating figures of Zhou Ze and me leaving together, Peiji stood behind, calling out to me with a hoarse voice again and again. So this is how painful it was for you back then when you saw he, a Shuang, and me together. A Shuang, I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. I beg you to look back at me. I beg you to give me a chance to start over. This time, I definitely won't allow anyone else by my side. The Empress said, I ruined one of her important ministers, that I must compensate her. I was quite innocent. What trapped Peiji was clearly the karma he had sown himself, but I had no choice but to accept my fate and enter the academy. Now that the borders are settled, I too can guard this realm's peace in a different way. When Zhou Ze returned to the frontier, he made a point of saying goodbye to me. General, I heard about the past between you and Lord Pei while in the capital. Your courage to love and hate makes you shine even brighter in my heart than before. But I want to tell you, I can clearly distinguish between gratitude and admiration. I know that person hurt you deeply. There is no use saying more now. Let time and action speak for me. I nodded in agreement. I watched as Zhou Ziang whipped his horse and rode away, disappearing in a cloud of dust. While I studied hard under my teacher, Peiji still wouldn't settle down, seeing that my attitude never changed despite his pleas, and hearing that I was inseparable from Vice General Zhou Zi in the military. He not only changed He Shuang's name to Anu, but also clamoured about going to the military to achieve merit and glory. The Empress, with her heart for cherishing talent, summoned him repeatedly to advise and encourage him, hoping he would revive his official career, but he insisted on abandoning his post to join the military camp. His Majesty, unable to bear the pestering, finally granted his wish. But before he could be tested in warfare, Peiji lost a leg in a bandit suppression mission. When he was carried back home, everyone discovered the Pei residence was completely empty. It turned out that while Peiji was away joining the army, He Shuang had dismissed the servants, made off with what little family assets remained, and taken her daughter back to her coastal hometown. The court's placement system was well established, and Peiji could receive a substantial relief payment every month. But he took that money, leaned on his crutch, and bought alcohol to drink. Then day after day he would shout hoarsely in the weed, overgrown Pei residents. Passersby couldn't tell whether he was shouting Shuang or Shuang. They only knew that the once graceful and handsome minister had now gone mad and delirious, never sober, turned into a complete waste. Peiji's perspective, Feng Shuang is truly vicious, pretending to be all unambitious and uncompetitive, yet on the day Shuang and I got married, she pushed Shuang to the ground. Although the imperial physician said the pregnancy was stable and unaffected, she still needs to give an explanation to Shuang, who won't stop crying. A pregnant woman can't bear being wronged. Besides, it was Feng Shuang's fault to begin with. But somehow the servants searched the entire estate and couldn't find her anywhere. Shuang leaned against me and wiped her tears. Elder sister must be fleeing out of guilt, right? I thought what she said made sense, but I also thought Feng Shuang wouldn't go that far. No matter what mistakes she made, I wouldn't divorce her. Why act so childishly and play disappearing right now? Where is the dignified bearing of a legal wife who is about to become the legitimate mother? When she comes back, I'll definitely scold her properly. But I waited 2 days, and she still didn't return to the estate. I had no mood to accompany and congratulate Shuang in flower viewing, outings, painting eyebrows, or listening to opera. I just wondered, Feng Shuang has no family, no relatives or friends. Where could she be hiding? I ordered people to search through every inn, large and small. In the capital, searched through the residence of her maidservant Ting Yu's husband's family, but still couldn't find her. Finally, my gaze shifted toward the towering imperial palace. She was once valued by the Empress, so right now she must be seeking the sovereign's protection. But when I went to have an audience with the sovereign, she tossed me a divorce letter. She also said Feng Shuang had already left the capital, and right now had probably just reached the frontier. I was immediately so terrified that my limbs went numb, and a buzzing sound suddenly rang in my ears. The Shuo kingdom came with fierce momentum, elite soldiers and capable generals. She was going to her death. I kowtowed heavily, begging the sage to take back the order. Shuang, her body is already ruined. If she goes to the battlefield now, she'll lose her life. But the sage let out a cold laugh. Minister Pei, when you betrayed her, did you ever think that would be the same as forcing her to die? Do you know that this divorce letter was obtained in exchange for her life? I didn't understand. How could she, who had room in her heart for country and family, not have room for a mere woman like He Shuang? Having the country and family in one's heart is righteousness. Staying devoted and faithful is loyalty. For Feng Shuang, these don't conflict. The Empress said this at the end. As soon as the war started, I brought the list of spies to the military camp. Our army, originally at a disadvantage, immediately reversed the situation and gained the upper hand using the false intelligence we spread. But the Shuo kingdom had laid low for many years and came prepared. It would take some time to completely repel them. Moreover, Desheng wouldn't give up easily either. What country doesn't covet another's territory? Faced with my sudden arrival, some new generals were unconvinced. They said, how could a woman who had lost her right arm lead troops into battle, so I fought them barehanded on the training ground and made them submit. Some female soldiers looked up to me as a role model, and during breaks from drills they would often gather around me, telling me about the origins of the Chiluo army. Originally, His Majesty had wanted to form an elite female military unit, but when the orphanage conducted selections, girls were by default not chosen for scholarly pursuits. It was either learning crafts or nothing. Those who took up martial arts were few and far between. Until I appeared. Until I took up spear and donned armor, blazing a trail that drew everyone's attention, letting many women know there was also this path of going to battle to defend home and country. Not only did female martial practitioners from the orphanage increase greatly, many women with families and kin also chose to answer the call and enlist. Up to now, the Chiluo army has taken shape, and its combat strength is no less than the male battalions. The male soldiers, provoked by this, have also been giving their all among them. A young soldier repeatedly achieved military merit. He even went so far as to sneak into the enemy camp alone in the dead of night, bringing back the head of an enemy general. At the dim light of dawn, the head with eyes that wouldn't close in death still carried lingering warmth. Just like that, it was placed before everyone. He had achieved merit, but had also violated military orders. I reprimanded him, asking why. The young soldier scratched his head. Back then, you single-handedly raided the enemy camp to rescue the military advisor. I was emulating the general's spirit. When he brought up that old matter between Peiji and me, I froze. So, to maintain military discipline and serve as a warning to the three armies. He and I each received 30 strikes of the military rod, but he showed no fear of pain whatsoever. When the military law was being carried out, he even lay on the bench turning to look at me, eyes bright and sparkling. He said, "General Feng, my name is Jose." My composure slipped, and I took a blow from the military rod hard. Yet in my heart I felt this young man had exceptional courage, and was quick-witted and adaptable. If I had known, I would have saved it for Ting Yu, but on second thought, forget it. Those in the military live day by day with no certainty, so it is better to let Ting Yu live a stable life. Letters from Ting Yu arrived from the capital from time to time. She said her mother-in-law and husband treated her extremely well, and now she was pregnant. She also said Peiji wanted to rush to the frontier, but the Empress feared he would disturb my morale and issued an edict forbidding him from leaving the capital. She said Peiji went to court every day not doing his proper work, just begging the Empress to let him come find me. The Empress was thoroughly enraged. Peiji was fined his salary and suspended from duty. With nothing to do, he spent every day drinking heavily at his residence, and had become a laughingstock throughout the capital. From bitter cold to scorching heat, from tender leaves to withered branches, letters and military orders, one after another, the expanding territory inch by inch. Ting Yu's latest letter said He Shuang gave birth to a baby girl. Peiji looked at her and tears fell, naming her Nian Shuang. He Shuang was very dissatisfied. "I am right here, why Nian, what Shuang?" When the literate maid told her, "Nian Shuang, the Shuang from General Feng Shuang," she was so angry she smashed teacups all over the floor. I picked up my brush and replied with one sentence, "He is really such bad luck."